And someone brought up something very interesting to me, or at the very least said it. I think I was watching a show or a podcast about it. And they said something that was extremely enlightening. What is the difference? And I guess I should introduce this is a deep or deeper segment. So we're going into a little bit of a mind, food for thought mind exercise. What is the difference between a mass shooter and a terrorist? The reason why I bring this up is because when people do horrible things to other people, it makes sense that you would call them mentally ill. Because what rational person would do such a thing? Regardless of their background, their situation, their religion, anybody willing to condemn human lives, belittle human lives to the point where you can kill a bunch of them for no reason, no remorse, to do horrible acts to these people, you have to, in theory, be mentally ill. So, what is the difference between the two? What is the difference between someone like Andre Hale, a mass shooter who wants to go kill a bunch of people for their own selfish reasons, and a terrorist who wants to go kill a bunch of people for their own selfish reasons? Now, I'm not saying every situation where loss of life at a large enough scale is a mental health situation. War can be very frustrating. These situations where your back is against the wall can be very hard to conceptualize. But when there's no reason or remorse and you're just trying to make noise, that's exactly what a terrorist would do. And that's exactly why mass shooters do what they do. They want to make noise. They don't value human life. They don't even value their own life. So, with that said, it makes the conversation interesting when it comes down to mass shooting and terrorists, how we deal with them from an American perspective. For mass shooters, for mass shooters, for the most part, how we deal with them is we kind of blame one of two things, right? We either blame guns for the reason why they are mass shooters in the first place, or we kind of blame guns as the tool of destruction that the mass shooters use to commit the awful action that they are committing. Or we blame the mental health of the individual that's committing the action, and whether it's society or the community around them not being able to help them get out of their rut, basically. So one of two things usual: the weapon of destruction or the mental capacity of the individual. But we don't do that for terrorists. For terrorists, we just say they're evil scum of the earth that deserve to be annihilated. For the word terrorist is immediately a trigger word. You immediately have negative connotations for good reason. There's a good reason. 9/11 has changed a lot for America. We don't like terrorists because they're killing the people for no reason. But the reason why I'm comparing the two is mass shooter is technically a trigger word too, but to a different extent, is because maybe we should be treating them the same. Maybe we can take steps to create a safer society like we did after 9/11 in terms of, homeland security and, going to the airport to ensure we do our best to create a safer environment for people going on planes, for America in general, a safer environment. We could take steps to do that. So if we did that for our terrorists, why can't we do that for mass shooters? Why is the need to hold a gun, and I'm not saying take all guns away, but why is the need to hold an individualized gun such a strong principle that we can't take steps for better protection for society. Hopefully, we can, which is the point. Hopefully, you have better means to create a safer environment for society. I've talked about it plenty, whether it's security, whether it's better ways to make sure that we understand who has guns and these weapons, whether it's overall just having more training and understanding on how to use these guns. But creating a safer environment is something that's pretty obvious. There's so many things that I would say Republicans would agree with that to ensure that we have less terrorists in our country. Regardless of how you feel about Homeland Security, I think they recognize that more security at airports, more security on airplanes, more security overall in these public spaces, a lot of them, of course, where there's a lot of people, is a net positive. I think a lot of people on the right would also agree that we want better security on our border. We want better means of vetting the immigrants that are coming into the country. But it dawns on me how they're not willing to have the conversation regarding certain public spaces like a school, like a mall, like any of that. It dawns on me why they're not willing to have the conversation on better security, better safety measures in terms of using a gun. It dawns on me why they're willing to push back on this situation, but is all for having the best security possible at our border. I'm just saying that if the goal is safety and security for the people, especially kids, if the goal is a better society overall, then why do we change our rhetoric based off the situation? Playing the politics game, as I've said multiple times, that I don't like. The politics game, the way to emotionally trigger the voters. But once you really have a conversation, if I'm really having an honest conversation with another individual, and we know that the end all goal, the reason why the Second Amendment exists, the sole reason it exists, is for safety and security of us as individuals, whether it's from a criminal, whether it's for the government. It's important. And something else I want to point out, and this is a bigger conversation regarding mass shooting and gun usage, is the understanding that not everybody wants to use gun. Not everybody wants to own a gun. So the only way a lot of this rhetoric for the Second Amendment that people would say, "Oh, my gun, I don't take my gun. It's like I don't need a permit. I don't need any of that. Everyone should just have guns, and then we will all be safe," is ridiculous. But we'll not step into that. Let's focus on the point. So, if we're kind of looking at mass shooters and terrorists kind of similar, we recognize that we want to take certain steps to ensure better safety and security for America, for society. Pretty obvious, right? It's also interesting that for mass shooters, we care about the mental turmoil that led up to this, but for terrorists, we think they're scum of the earth. We think they're less than human. Why do we try to humanize mass shooters? Why do we try to dive into their mental health? Why do we try to dive into their background? I'm not saying these are not good things because more information helps prevent further disaster. But we don't have the same kind of approach when it comes to terrorists. We don't care how the person thinks what they think. We don't care about their mental aptitude. We don't care how they're raised. We don't care. They're terrorists. But mass shooters, we definitely care. Like, even with this Andre Hale stuff, even though it's crazy and I talked about it, sounds like we went in a lot of depth to find that Nashville manifesto. Sounds like we went in a lot of depth to see that certain people follow the Daily Wire. Certain people follow the Young Turks. We go through a whole slew of things to see their connections so we can criticize the connections that led up to this point. It doesn't seem like the goal from more information is to prevent further disaster. What it seems like to me is we're playing the politics game again. We're playing that weird game to ensure that we can make ourselves and our positions look stronger than the other. The goal is misguided yet again in this conversation. Security, safety, the humanization or dehumanization of the individual that committed the actions. It's inconsistently used for two figures that are exactly the same. Both individuals, as I'm going to say it again, both individuals are mentally ill at the end of the day, to want to kill a number of people to send a message, to not look at human life as important enough to not to kill at masses, to not even value your own life to the point where a lot of these mass shooters kill themselves, a lot of these terrorists kill themselves. They're one and the same. Mass shooters are just domestic terrorists, to be honest. But we treat them very differently. Foreign terrorists and domestic. Terrorists are terrorists. Mass shooters are mass shooters. Killing a ton of people at scale is deplorable actions. So my vision, or how I see the better way to approach this, is that we create better means for security and safety in both dealing with foreign terrorism and dealing with domestic terrorism. We kind of keep it consistent. Better safety and security for both. And then as for the humanization of the individual, well, it's up to you on how you want to approach that, to be honest. There are people who care about people at the individual level, and those people are appreciated. And again, this will be part of a big conversation in terms of the cycle of hatred. This is very important in terms of the cycle of hatred when it comes to humanizing the individual. It's up to you what you want to do. Do you want to dehumanize all these terrorists, quote unquote, and get rid of them all? Or do you want to humanize them and fix the root of the problem? That's something I can't tell you. That's not something I can answer for you. That's something you're going to have to find for yourself. And that's just the honest truth. We all will act differently based off the circumstance. If my friend was a mass shooter, I would feel differently if it was a random person. If my brother was killed by a mass shooting, I'll feel different if it's a random kid. So I'm not going to tell you how to feel. I'm not going to tell you how you should approach the individual. The only thing I will tell you is to keep it consistent and approach it based off your values, not your politics.